Hello everyone and welcome to One Teacher, One Scientist chat room. Today we have a very eminent person from the theatre world, Vivek Mansukhani with us, and he's the founder of Scene Stealers, a theatre company, and is doing a great job in spreading the theatre world and bringing it to our homes. One of his production, Animals Out of Paper, is something that has really kind of been a scene stealer for me.
Thank you, Vaishali. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us time and sharing your ideas on how theatre can be such an important part of a child's development. Usually we find that creative arts, and especially theatre, dance, music, all these find a very second rung position in school education. Usually teachers and schools are so involved in teaching mainstream subjects like science, English, maths, languages, other languages, but creative arts finds its position as maybe just for an annual day or a one-off production that schools look forward to. How can we bring in theatre as a mainstream subject or integrate it in our everyday teaching? What are your thoughts about it, Vivek?
Yeah, firstly, I think I was very lucky to be exposed to theatre at a relatively young age. It wasn't, unfortunately, in junior school, but more in high school. And then, I founded my theatre company when I was in first year college, and it's been many, many years. So I'm really grateful for that founding, that my teachers and of course other theatre and drama teachers that I met in Calcutta, where I lived earlier, were able to kind of instill in me. So to begin with, I think why theatre? I think theatre, as you know, compared to other performing arts, actually encapsulates so many different departments, right? So it really unleashes whether a child or an older person's creativity to the maximum. So in theatre, you have, storytelling, that's first important. So there's the writer, there's actors, there's someone directing, there's, role play, you're performing many different parts, you're creating characters, then you make props, you make lights, you make music, sound. So, it really stretches the creativity of every person involved in that project or production. So whether a child likes to act, whether a child likes to paint, whether a child likes to sing, create music, or create props out of nothing, theatre actually is like a microcosm of life. It's like a tiny, you get to live so many different roles, so many different characters. And I think it helps, since we're talking about children, it helps children to really express themselves very freely. It inspires them, it emboldens them. It can help them to connect, to one another much more closely than if they are locked up by themselves. And most importantly, I think it creates hope, it creates optimism. So when they actually perform the stories that they read in their literature classrooms and so on, things magically come alive. And the child gets to experience not just so many stories and fantasies, but also deal with reality. So they're able to express every possible emotion, from happiness to sadness, anger, frustration, disappointment, victory, what is failure, what is winning in life. They get to see also how other kids and other students or children experience the same thing maybe in different ways. So if I'm playing Red Riding Hood, if I'm playing Peter Pan, another child will play it very differently, right? So whether it's a historical or a fictional character or a real life character, they get to see life experience through not only their own eyes and own lens, but the lens of other people. So it really helps them to build different perspectives.
Right.
So coming back to your question, yes, I think it's very important that at a very early stage, one should instill a number of the performing arts in children's lives. So that includes music, dance, but certainly theatre, because it encompasses all the other departments as well. And I think it will help children to basically become better version of themselves. It will really help to expand their mind, their bodies, their understanding, their sensitivity. And that will go a long way in making a much more well-rounded individual than someone who's only into studying theory and studying, academic work. So it's a very practical exploration of whatever they're studying in every subject.
Yeah, so like what I can make out, like children today need skills. Information is all available at the click of a button. But today's child needs to build team spirit. Today's child need to know about collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Come up with creative solutions to real world problems. I mean, today we are living in such unprecedented times that there's uncertainty world over. So in such a situation, a child who has been exposed to creative arts could really build a lot of his creative thinking and critical thinking. What do you think about critical thinking aspect?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. I think doing something like theater from a younger age will develop the child in three different areas, if I may put it. One is, of course, the physical aspect. So, there's the body, the voice gets trained, your communication skills get strengthened, you speak better, you act better, you dance better, or you just move better. So you're much more confident. So on the one hand, it's looking at the physical aspect. The second aspect is the whole mental aspect. And as we were talking about, you go through so many different expressions, the navarasas, all the different emotions that a human being feels. So even if a child is very happy in a theater workshop or a class, they may experience sadness and pain and loss. So when that actually happens in that child's life, it's not a huge shock because they may be prepared for it. Similarly, if a child is experiencing a lot of grief at home for whatever reason, when they come to a class in theater and they're playing happy characters and seeing joy and hope, then they also get inspired that they're not bereft of those emotions. So the second level is really the mental or emotional level. And the third level, which is so important now, as you just said, is about behavior and skills. It really brings theater, particularly because it's not a one-person, even a one-person show is not really a one-person show. There are so many people involved in putting on a production, in rehearsing, in promoting, in doing the sound, lights, etc., etc. So it's teamwork. So it teaches a person how to work well with others, that you are not alone in this world and you are not the most important person in this world. You have to work with others and bring out the best in yourself and others. So that concept of being many in body and one in mind is very important. It also helps people to be more responsible. You take authority, because if I'm casting you as an actor in my play, then when the play begins, it's your role. My role is over as a director, right? So you have the responsibility that you have to be accountable to someone, whether it's the director or the producer or even the other actor. So it teaches you that. And it also teaches you that you are just a small cog in the wheel of the larger process of life.
Yeah,
you are not the wheel.
That's very important, because children today need to understand that we are a part of this whole world. It's not that the whole world revolves around us.
Yeah.
And with nuclear families with one or two children, every parent has, today's child starts feeling very entitled. Where that entitlement and that lack of empathy, I feel can really help a child overcome that sense of entitlement and probably build empathy and understand the other person's perspective, accept it better. And all these can actually help as in the 21st century, when today we are talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning taking the jobs. I think these are the skills that will help a person really shine in tomorrow's world, and these would be needed, I think, as key skills for survival.
Absolutely right. So I think 21st century skills are about being creative, being about compassionate, having empathy, putting yourself in another person's shoes. So the machine and the artificial intelligence will do a lot of things, but what you do with all that data, how do you interpret it, how do you apply it, and how do you even get the machines to perform better, to analyze data better. So through theater, you go through a lived experience, like a shared experience with so many other individuals. So later on in life, even if you may be alone, if you are a part of a small family or you're living alone, you reconnect, and somewhere in your mind you go back to those experiences, those emotions of happiness, sadness, joy, sharing, caring for one another, and all the creative abilities that you've unleashed being an actor or a designer or a lights person or a sound person or even writing stories. So theatre is all about telling stories, and we all have stories to tell. And some stories we're very happy to tell because we want to share it. And most of us have some parts of our life we don't want to share with others necessarily, or something we feel is very personal or very private. So when you're in the theatre space, and it's a very sacred space, it's very safe, and actors trust one another. That's very important. So 21st century skill is also about building trust, and that's so important now, because theatre helps you in a small community of 5 people, 10 people, whatever. The things you share, you talk about, your disappointments, your losses, or tragedy that you may have had in your life, and it builds a kind of circle of friendship around you, right? And maybe 20 years later, you may not have told someone else, but you remember that friend, and you could go back and, you could reconnect. So yeah, these skills which are now becoming so important in these uncertain times, the skill for dealing with ambiguity, the skill for dealing with things that you're not prepared for, emotions that you've not really experienced before, but because you've done that maybe on stage, some part of your mind and body is already prepared, so it won't come as that much of a shock to you, because knowingly, unknowingly, you've actually been in a performance where you may have played someone who is very sick or someone who has lost, everything they own. So yeah, I think using imagination, using expression and those powers, it really builds a more resilient person from within. And I think that's something every child needs, apart from all the education, knowledge, and those kinds of practical skills. You really need life skills. And I think theatre is probably the best platform, or at least one of the best platforms, that really ingrains life skills in any child, or even in an older stage in any human being.
Yeah, and I think somewhere a very important aspect for a child is the belief system that he's carrying.
Mm-hmm.
I can make out from our chat is that, theatre can also help children understand and come to terms with the belief systems that he's carrying, and maybe help him reprogram it, reprogram a negative belief that he might be carrying, which might just go a very long way in his own empowerment journey.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's what theatre does. It breaks down stereotypes. It breaks down the notions that you may have had previously, because when you interact with other human beings who are all diverse, they all may be the same age or even the same gender or the same economic background, but they all come from different life stories. So they bring different perspectives, different values, different ethical ideas, ideologies. And the more you do theatre and you interact with people from different strata and different backgrounds, it helps you break down the ideas you have about other people. It helps you break down ideas you have about humanity, about life. It gives you fresh perspectives, and you think that, the same issue is being dealt with by that person in a completely different way that I was approaching it. So It really helps you build a stronger and a more diverse value system, because your parents may have given the boy or the girl a certain set of values based on their own background. But when the child interacts with other children and they see how that person analyzes data, receives data, interprets data even, and how they deal with practical situations, it really helps you expand your own mindset. And then when the young child becomes a young adult, they're able to take decisions on their own. Because without that, if the child is only thinking from the perspective of the family they've been brought up in, maybe the 1 or 2 teachers that they're exposed to, they get a much smaller or limited worldview. Whereas in theatre, when you interact with so many people, when you read so much different literature and plays, and understand the psychology of the characters you're playing, put yourself in those shoes, and basically work with one another and observe different life states of people. Some may be in a lower life condition, some may be in a higher life condition. So as someone said that education cultivates minds, but the arts cultivate hearts. It really blossoms the heart. So are we looking at only cultivating the mind of the child, or also the heart? So I think performing arts in general, or even visual arts, creative arts, any kind of artistic endeavor, and particularly theatre, because that's my background, it really helps to cultivate and polish your heart and expand your horizons, expand your thinking, and make you a much more well-rounded human being.
And I think also experiences, I mean, you bring like a rich plethora of experiences on the table, and can really help children build problem solving skills, because how each child has dealt with situations can actually give children ideas on, there could be many ways of approaching a problem. There are many alternatives, to find a solution.
Right.
So it really help children in problem solving skills, what I can make.
Oh, absolutely. See, because theatre, you may rehearse the play for a month, but when the show time happens, whether it's an annual day or any other performance, or just a performance for the parents and family, what happens on stage is something that happens at that time. You can't predict it. So if an actor forgets their lines, if somebody forgets to put on the lights or put off the lights, if someone's forgotten to have the right costume, so everyone has to improvise. You have to think on the spot. So this is a problem. You can't go back and say, tell the audience, come back tomorrow because we're not ready, right? You have to think on your feet. You have to take the help of other people around and immediately solve that problem in the there and now. So theatre prepares you for the worst possible situations. And I remember having done so many productions, when things are going wrong backstage, the audience has no idea. An actor may have fallen very sick and can't even go on stage. Somebody else jumps in, does their part. Or my fellow actor has forgotten all his lines and jumped to the next scene. So I have to jump in and, remind the person to come back. Or if there's some, confusion in the auditorium, something's going wrong, how do I manage that without affecting the flow and the continuity of the performance? So it really teaches you those skills that you might need, your reflex actions in an emergency, in problem solving, in dealing with crisis. So it really prepares you for worst case scenarios. And even, it's not just in the performance, even in when we do workshops and rehearsals, actors and directors who are very smart sometimes create scenarios where everything is going wrong, how to work in that scenario. So when I'm training my actors, I prepare them like, what happens if there's a total blackout in the auditorium? What happens if there's a fire? What will you do, right? What if some audience member suddenly turns very hostile? If there's a mobile phone ringing constantly, how do you prepare for all these things? I think theatre really prepares you and gives you that whole landscape of opportunities to kind of navigate.
Correct. And this is so important because this is what is problem solving in a real world situation. And I'm just thinking that if children are exposed to theatre right from the beginning, they can actually even learn so many subjects through theatre. Like, language can easily be done through theatre.
Right.
And also culture and history. It depends on what kind of theatrical performance that you're looking at. But a teacher can actually bring her chapters alive through theatre.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember because, whether it was history or whether it was literature, whether we did Shakespeare, bringing those characters alive on stage is really magical. So one of my favorite plays, which is a Shakespeare play, is A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I've played women characters, I've played male characters, I've played fairy characters. So when I now see the play, it's almost like I remember almost all the lines by heart. I remember the various things that happened and how magically it came alive. Because if I'd only read the script and memorized some lines to reproduce in my examination, of course, that is very good as well. You need to do that. But because it came alive, it taught me a lot more than just preparing myself for that 100-mark exam, right? It taught me, so I sometimes think of the characters, how they responded in those situations, what were the lines they used. I sometimes use those Shakespearean lines in a day-to-day basis. It taught me about, how I approach different roles differently, So it really brings the page alive on stage, whether it's a history or even a science subject, and particularly literature and other classics and tales. It really stretches your imagination, and then you see that a different child is playing this character differently, a teacher is interpreting this differently. So you get a much more holistic, a much more kaleidoscopic understanding rather than a one-dimensional understanding.
Correct. And what I can make out is that it can also help break gender biases here. So many of these biases that get built as we grow up can be broken when a child is actively involved in theatre, because as you said, you could be a woman performing a male role, or
Correct.
a man performing a woman's role, and that's when the gender bias can actually get very easily broken without even the child consciously aware of it, and
Yeah.
he grows up without many of these biases that we
You're absolutely right. It breaks down those stereotypes because, you have male superheroes, you have female superheroes or heroines, whatever you'd like to call them. And there's so many characters where women are much more important than male characters. And theater is a safe space because you are working with other human beings. It's not whether she's a girl or he's a boy. You're physically getting closer to one another. You're going into someone else's emotional graph. If I'm sharing a scene with you, which is, let's say, about a painful divorce situation, just as an example, then you and I are playing off each other's emotions. So there's nothing about man, woman. You're just another human being. How does that human being relate to another? How does the other person empathize? So it absolutely breaks down a lot of biases, gender for sure, sexuality. I have a very dear friend, Varun, who does, puppetry work, and even puppetry, which is a form of theater, I'd like to think. Through his work, he's broken down so many misconceptions about gender, sexuality, reproductive health as well. And these are things, again, through theater, you talk about sex education in schools at a later stage, which is more to do with biological understanding.
Yeah.
But gender education, gender understanding through theater can actually also help in a very simple way without getting children very conscious or embarrassed about situations, in a very natural way. I mean, you mentioned the play Animals Out of Paper, which we staged a few months ago. So the character I play in it is a character called Andy, who's actually going through a lot of depression and tragedy in his life, but his character is always very hopeful. He's always writing a diary, counting all his blessings. So, somewhere, because I was playing that character and rehearsing and performing, somewhere those shades of those characters or some nuances always stayed with me. So even now, sometimes when I'm depressed or, there's bad news, I turn to count my blessings. Like, I may not have everything, but I have so many other things that are working positively. So like that, you tend to, subconsciously go back to the characters you may have played or the stories you have read in theater and performed or seen other actors do as well. So I think it really opens up a vast canvas of emotions that otherwise you would not get the chance to experience.
Yeah, so true. I'm just kind of thinking what a world it would be if children were studying with creative arts as the mainstream subject.
Oh, that would be a dream come true, wouldn't it? Yeah. And that may not be too far away because it's all about experiencing life and life's emotions. And that's what children need to know, to how to become better human beings, how to live life successfully, not get A job and B job.
A lot can be attributed to people losing that inner connect. I would say that somewhere we lose the connection of why we were here, in the first place. Are we here just to live a job? Are we here to just kind of get 100 on 100 in our tests and exams? Or is it something that we need to grow as human beings, as individuals, and at the soul level?
Absolutely. So there's this Japanese educator and Buddhist scholar, Sunesaburo Makiguchi, who said that the real role of education is the happiness of children.
Yeah.
So how does a child or a human being become happy? When they really explore all facets of their personality, their mind, their body, their experiences, and also have the basic respect for other human beings, all other human beings, animate, inanimate. So all the things we're dealing with now, whether it's environmental disasters, whether it's health issues, at the fundamental level, it springs from not really respecting oneself, not respecting other humans, and not respecting one's environment. So the correct education, which includes, I'm hoping, a large component of theatre and performing arts, will ingrain all these qualities, these ethical values, ideologies, these concepts, which are very important for internal growth, as you said. Not just growing externally and acquiring 10 degrees and 10 jobs, but really bringing out your own potential, tapping into that, and falling back on your own self, because we all have the strength and ability to deal with crisis. But unless we've tested that and we've rehearsed that, so theater is like a rehearsal, that rehearsal prepares you for the day when the show is finally there. So the theater of life also, we need to rehearse, practice. So when there's a big happy moment or a big sad moment, we are not caught unawares. Somewhere we have prepared for that, and we will do the best performance in that situation.
Yeah, such a brilliant note. Very insightful, Vivek. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I just hope that day is not far away where we see children experiencing the world around them and growing from within, staying connected within and create a more sustainable and humane world.
Absolutely. And that would be amazing. Thank you so much, and enjoyed speaking with you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vivek.